Welcome everyone to Polyleaf's Top 50 Solo-Friendly Board Games Played within the year 2020. This is not a list of my favorite games that were published in 2020, but is instead a list of the favorite games that I played over the course of the year. This is the first of 3 episodes, and this episode will cover games number 50 through 31. Let's begin by asking, what is on this list? This includes several types of games in there. Naturally, it does include those games that are designed for a single player. After all, it is a solo-friendly list. But it also, of course, will include fully cooperative games because fully cooperative games are very often very solo-friendly on how they are handled. So you'll see several cooperative games here. You're also going to see games that use an automa as a solo player's opponent in there. These have become more and more popular in how they are being implemented lately. And when I think of an automa, I think of it as a light AI system that doesn't try to precisely act like a player. Now, there are probably a couple of games in here that do try to act like a player in their style in there, but I do prefer the automa type of AI systems that you have. And I also have a few games in here that have solo specific scenarios, meaning it's mainly a competitive game, but there are also scenarios in there so that you could play as a single player. And there might be some slight differences in how you play as a result of this. And finally, there is actually one game in here where I just play all of the sides rather than trying to play against an AI or anything like this. As I said, that's very much the exception to the rules. Now that we know what's on the list, what's not on this list? First off, this list does not include any games that I play exclusively through an app. I must have played the physical version at some point during the course of the year in order for it to be eligible. If I played exclusively on an app, then it will be eligible for another list that I'm trying to create that would be my favorite app games. The second thing is that I must have played it at least once this year. If I haven't played it, it will not be on this list, as this is a list of the favorite games that I've played during the course of the year. Now, if you enjoy the game Sprawlopolis, I'm afraid it's not going to be here this year because I lost my copy and haven't been able to replace it yet. So, as I don't have a copy of Sprawlopolis and I haven't had one for the course of the year, it's not going to be on this list. I should also make a note of my general preferences here. I prefer smaller to medium sized games as opposed to games that take up a huge amount of table space. If it looks like a game is going to have a huge footprint, I'm probably not going to bother getting it. I always see these Kickstarters with such big, huge, 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 huge games. It is goodbye, 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 goodbye. I've gotten a couple of them, but they don't tend to make the table, and there are probably not going to be many of those that are going to make this list in here. I prefer the smaller to medium ones. I should note that this trend isn't as strong as it used to be, simply because I now have a better gaming space than I had in previous years. And with that, I do have a couple of larger games that are going to be seen on this list. I also prefer lighter to medium games. I have the thinking that I like to do on the job and then like to take a break by having less thinking involved. So you're going to find very few games in here that are very, very heavy on the brain burning. And another thing I should note here is that when I play co-op games, I prefer to play them with as few characters as possible. I don't like handling large number of characters at a time. Thus, if there's a single character mode, I'm probably going to be playing the single character mode. If there is a requirement to be 2 to 4 characters, I'm probably playing it with 2. So that's something to keep in mind for my preferences in my gaming. And now I think it's time for us to head on to our list. Let's begin with number 50, Haplomachus. Haplomachus is designed by Adam and Josh Carlson for Chip Theory Games, originally published in 2012. This game has 3 sets released in it: Haplomachus The Lost Cities, Haplomachus Rise of Rome, and Haplomachus Origins. Origins has 3 small specialty maps, while the Rise of Rome and the Lost Cities have larger maps that are more general. This game simulates gladiatorial battles in the ancient world. If you're playing player on player, each of you has a gladiatorial team. If you're playing in solo mode, you are going to be playing against beasts or titans or some other automated opponent. In El Dorado, it's actually against another gladiatorial team, and they are handled through die rolls to show exactly how they operate in there. So each of them has their own little flavor in there. And that is Hoplomachus by Chip Theory Games. For number 49, we have Petrichor. Petrichor is designed by David Chirka for Ape Games, published in 2018. And in Petrichor, you are playing weather patterns who are attempting to become the dominant force to help the plants grow in the world below. So you create rain clouds, and these clouds will produce water, and you want your water droplets to be the ones that have the majority for the various plants in the area. In the solo mode, you are going against the southern winds, who, of course, have their own automated rules for how they perform their watering, and you have to go, of course, and do better than these southern winds, who are trying to get in your way and, of course, try to outdo you. And thus, in Petrichor, you have this very, very different style in here. You're not facing an enemy or anything like this. You're just simply trying to water plants in Petrichor. For my number 48, we have Edge of Darkness. Edge of Darkness is designed by John D. Clare for AEG Games in 2019. This is a card crafting game, one of John D. Clare's in that particular series, and it is huge. This is probably the largest footprint game that I have on my list, which is why it's down at 48 rather than up closer to the top. And in this one, you are attempting to become the guild that has the most influence over the area, as seeds of darkness are starting to come in from all around here. So it's a little bit dark on the theme side that we have in here. In this one, you try to draft cards from a row in here. You try to build up those cards, use their actions, and eventually discard them in there. And you have a common row of drafting on each turn rather than you trying to build up your own deck. So that makes it a little bit different from other games of this sort. And this is Edge of Darkness. And just as number 48 was large in space, number 47 is probably the heaviest game that we have in my list, and that is Spirit Island. Now, on Spirit Island, you are playing a group of spirits that are trying to defend their home against European invaders. These European invaders are trying to come into your land, are trying to settle, and are trying to turn everything into a perfect European style homeland. And of course, you're trying to break all that apart and bring it back to its nice natural style and drive them away. You need to chase them off with fear as much as you can before the island is too ruined for you to be able to continue your existence in here. And this is in Spirit Island. And this is a rather heavy game, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I just love the theme, but it's a little bit heavy, so it doesn't make the table all that often. And that's why it's sitting down here at number 47. For my number 46, we have Marvel Champions. Marvel Champions is designed by Michael Boggs for Fantasy Flight Games and published in 2019. This is one of Fantasy Flight Games' living card games, which means that There are going to be new decks in each of the expansions that you're going to be getting in there, more and more cards coming in, and you need to construct your deck in order to play your opponent. Now, the deck construction aspects in this game aren't as strong as in the other living card games yet, partly because of the style of the game, and partly because there aren't as many decks yet available as there are for the Lord of the Rings or for Arkham Horror in here. Because I don't like deck construction all that much in here, that's the reason why this is down at 46. That, and of all the living card games that are out there, this is probably the one with the theme that I'm least interested in. Nevertheless, because of all the deck construction, the other living card games, I haven't even made this list. Perhaps I should look at that sometime in the future, but for now, my number 46 is Marvel Champions. Now to my 45, we have Trains. Trains is designed by Hisashi Hayashi for Okazu brand, that was published in English by AEG, so that is the edition that I have. It's published in 2012. The best way to think about Trains is think of Dominion with trains. In addition to the cars you are trying to form into a deck, you also have a board. And on this board, you're trying to build rail lines, and you're also trying to add on stations within the city and trying to connect these stations plus your lines in there as one of your sources for victory points. You can also get victory points, of course, through victory point cards as you're trying to construct in there. Now, one of the things you have to be careful of as you're playing, though, is that whenever you build stuff, you have the danger of accumulating waste. And you have to have ways of mitigating and getting rid of this waste in order to be able to have an optimal deck and to be able to win the game. And that is my number 45, Trains. For my number 44 game, we have Octodice. Octodice is designed by Christophe Toussaint. It is published by Pegasus Spiel in Europe and by AEG in the United States. This is a roll and write game where you have 3 white dice that specify your actions and 3 black dice that specify the values that you have in there. The values are either numbers or colors, so you have both of those on each of the sides. Now, each die also includes an octopod side in here that doesn't help you with any of your actions, though you can score points through what are known as octopod actions, and you also need a certain number of octopods in each round in order to avoid getting certain penalties in there. This has been one of my favorite roll and write games, except for the fact that lately I've been noticing that the numbers and colors are wearing off on my black dice. Now, I've created a custom set of dice for myself, but that's something that you shouldn't have to depend on being able to do. So, except for the fact that your dice are going to wear out pretty quickly, which could be a problem if you're going to play this solo, I have a lot of fun with Octodice. My number 43 is Quad Heroes. Quad Heroes is designed by Ryan Eiler for Wonderman Games. And in this game, you are playing a cube. And you have 6 distinct sides on this cube. And when you start your turn, you roll in one of the 4 directions that you can go around the board. And when you roll that way, you'll have a new side facing up. And this side then dictates the action that you take after you make your roll. As you go along in the game, you could upgrade your actions so that you can do more and more as you do each one. You also accumulate cards, which will allow you to do special items in there. Now, this game has both competitive and cooperative slash solo play. And when you play in the solo mode in there, you're going against the board, racing the clock, so to speak, in here. And as you're racing the clock, you are also looking at this layout that you've got and saying, this is impossible. Yet, when you do all your upgrades and as you go along on the board, you're actually able to accomplish this when you do things right in Quad Heroes. There's a little bit of programming in here and anticipation on what you've done, what you're doing in here, and I find this a lot of fun. It helps to scratch that itch for Robo Rally, which is an old game that I really miss these days, but I feel that Quad Heroes is a lot more suitable for solo play. Thus, my number 43 is Quad Heroes. Next, we have number 42. My number 42 is The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9. This is designed by Thomas Singh and is published by Cosmos Games. Note that this is a cooperative trick-taking game, and what's tricky about it is that you have to complete certain missions in there, and of course, you don't know what the hands are for the other players. Naturally, this is not designed for solo play, but I did pick up a solo variant on the Board Game Geek kit that I like to use. In here, you have 3 dummies. One of the dummies always plays the lowest card that's legally able to be played at the time. The next dummy always plays the highest card that could be legally played at the time. And the third one always plays in a deterministic order. And this adds the level of challenge that you would have when you're doing the normal cooperative style and hidden cards in there. And you could use the communications in order to override it in there on those rare times you are allowed to communicate, which is, in this game, quite rare. And this gives a nice little solo experience for our Kinderspear winner for 2020, The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9. My number 41 is another trick-taking game, Cobras. Cobras is designed by Chris and Suzanne Zinley for Cardboard Edison in 2017. In this game, you are trying to optimize your trick wins and losses so that you could gain as many points as possible. Whenever you lose a trick, you gain Cobras into your basket. Whenever you win a trick, you will then sell those off. And the idea there is to try to sell them off as close to 7 Cobras as possible, because as soon as you pass 7 Cobras, the price drops very, very quickly on what you're going to be receiving here. So it's all about optimizing when you win and lose your tricks. This is one of the few trick-taking games that has a built-in solo mode, and that's the reason why I rank it above The Crew, because it does have solo mode built into it. And when you're playing solo, you have 2 dummies, and there are special rules on how the dummies operate so that you're able to work with them and solo and have a challenge in there. Thus, my number 41 is Cobras. My number 40 game is Paperback. Paperback is designed by Tim Fowers and was published in 2014 by Fowers Games. This game is a deck building word game. During your turn, you are going to form a word from the cards in your hands. Any of the cards that you use in order to form this word could be used for their special abilities and for the purchase power that they may have. You could then purchase more cards or take other actions based on whatever the cards say. Now, for the solo and co-op modes, you are going to be building this tableau that includes the fame cards, which are the VP cards in this game. And during the course of the game, you're going to purchase these fame cards from there. And what happens though is whenever you don't purchase a fame card, you are going to have tokens added there. And you need to get rid of those tokens as quickly as possible, because if too many accumulate, you will lose the game. And that is the tension that you will have in there as you play solo mode in Paperback. My number 39 is Elevenses for One. Elevenses for One is designed by David Harding, which is published in 2014 by Eagle Gryphon Games. In this game, you are attempting to prepare tea for an Elevenses meal. Now, in order to do this, you must get all of the items in order. Thus, you have 11 cards, and you need to get those 11 cards in order before 15 minutes ends. And most turns are going to consume 1 minute of this time. So you have very, very few turns in which to accomplish this. When this was republished in 2016, it was combined with my number 38, Bowling Solitaire. Bowling Solitaire was designed by Sid Saxon and was originally published in 1969 in the book A Gamut of Games and was commercially produced by Eagle Griffin Games in 2016. Yes, quite a number of years later. In this game, you are simulating a game of bowling. You, of course, will have 10 frames as you will have in a standard bowling match. And what you do is you will set out 10 cards that are in a pin layout, and you will have the other 10 cards are going to be in a tableau. And you use the tableau cards in order to try to knock down the pins. If you get stuck, then you could remove the top cards on the tableau so that you could try to continue. The idea there, if you don't have to restart, then you get a strike if you knock down all the pins. You knock down all the pins after doing the restart, then you get a spare, and if after that second round you still get stuck in there, then you'll have an open frame. And you'll score it exactly as you will in bowling. So that's a nice little fun way to do some bowling scoring without actually going to a bowling alley. And that is my number 38, Bowling Solitaire. For my number 37, we have Star Realms Frontiers. Star Realms Frontiers was designed by Robert Doherty and Darwin Castle and was published in 2018 by White Wizard Games. I am specifically talking about Star Wars Frontiers here because it has the most solo opponents that you have in any of the Star Realms line in here. In fact, as far as I know, it contains all of the solo opponents that were published in earlier sets to it, plus several new ones. So if you want to play Star Realms for solo mode, then I highly recommend Frontiers over any of the parts of that series in here. In Star Realms, this is a classic deck building game where you have an aisle of cards that you could purchase. So of course you have purchase power cards and you have cards that do damage to your opponent. And the idea is to bring your opponent's authority down to 0 before that happens to you. And that is Star Realms Frontiers. My number 36 is Castle Ravenloft, which is designed by Robert Heinzu, Peter Lee, Mike Merrills, and Bill Slavicsek. And this was published in 2010 by Wizards of the Coast. This was the first of the Dungeons & Dragons board game series, which was published back in the days of the 4th edition of D&D. Fourth edition, I really didn't get along with all that much, so it's been a few years before I decided to actually try to pick up Castle Ravenloft. And of all of the D&D adventure series, I find that this one is my favorite. And that is because it is optimized for standalone play for a single round in here, and I think that's my favorite way of going. If you prefer campaigns in the way in which you like to play your D&D adventure board games, then you might consider one of the latter ones, such as the Temple of Elemental Evil, the Tomb of Annihilation, or the most recent one. But whichever way you're doing, you have a little fun in there with a little bit of a dungeon crawl, a little bit of light dungeon crawl, I might say in there, here in Castle Ravenloft. My number 35 is Maki. Maki is designed by Jack Staines and was originally published as a print and play in 2013, but was commercially published by Side Room Games in 2020. In this game, you are members of the French resistance during World War II, and the idea here is you are trying to complete 2 missions before the morale of the town gets too low. This is a worker placement game where you place your operatives at specific locations along the board, but the trick is that After you complete your actions, you have to be able to get back to a safe house. Because if you can't get back to the safe house, you are caught by the milice. And if you're caught by the milice, you lose an operative for the rest of the game. If you lose all your operatives, or if you run out of time, or if the morale gets too low, I'm afraid that the Germans are going to be in control of your town for the rest of the war. And that is Maki. My number 34 game is Pentaquark. Pentaquark, a quantum state solo game, was designed by Mike Mullins and was published in 2016 by Button Shy Games. In this game, you are trying to synthesize a pentaquark, which has been quite elusive over time in there. And in each of your turns, what you're going to do is you are going to pull one of the particles that comes into the chamber into your collection area, one into an area that's a holding chamber, and one of them gets discarded in there. And the idea there is you are trying to construct the right quarks together to form your particle. Now, this is going to take some time and patience, and eventually you're going to have to slough off some of the particles that you've collected and gain new ones as you sieve through the ones that come along through each of your turns. And you have to do this before each of your quarks get annihilated and cause you to start all over and start a new game. And that is what happens, though, when you try to look for new particles in Pentaquark. My number 32 game is Forbidden Desert. Forbidden Desert was designed by Matt Leacock and was published in 2013 by Gamewright. And this is a fully cooperative game for 2 to 5 players where you are stuck in a desert and you need to find various components for a flying machine that you are going to collect, gather, bring to the assembly spot, and at that assembly location, you're going to assemble it and then get out of the place because you are going to die if you stay there too long. Because the sands are coming, the winds are blowing, and soon everything is going to be covered under a mountain of sand. And you don't want to be around when that happens because you don't want to be forever stuck in the Forbidden Desert. Finally, my number 31 game is Burglar Bros. This was designed by Tim Fowers and was published in 2015 by Fowers Games. In this game, you are trying to perpetrate a heist in an office or bank building. And what you do is you have to enter into the bottom floor of the building, find the safe, determine its combination, crack it open, find the stairs, get up, and if you have another floor which to find something, you need to find that safe, collect the items and goods, and then get up. And after you do that 3 times, you finally reach the helipad at the top where a helicopter will take you away so that you could get scot free with all the loot you carried. Of course, you don't have to worry about the various devices and traps that are all over the place in the building. And naturally, there are guards patrolling all over that can catch you before you can get the loot. And that's what happens in Burglar Bros. And that concludes the cut. And that concludes the first set of games in Pine Leaf's Top 50 Solo Friendly Board Games. And we'll see in the next episode where I will head on into the number 31 to 11 here at Pine Leaf's Top 50.